Hello, and welcome to the Taccion Mind and a Taccion Triage. My name is Brandy, and today I'm going to talk to you about the challenge of beliefs of the child king. Now, what do I mean when I say child king? This will resonate for you if you found that you were a child who had to assume heavy responsibilities in the form of a crown to continue to run a household, to take on something that was not your responsibility, but your heart would not let you let it ride. Okay, so there's this energy where, the core motivation for the child king is to prevent like total annihilation, to protect the vulnerable. In my situation, I am a child king. What I mean by that is I assumed a crown when I was a child myself because I hadn't even really figured out who I was. And many of you know I talk openly about my childhood and my father's drug addiction, which was difficult to navigate. But I also had a 3-year-old brother at the time who was vulnerable, and I had my mother who did not have the resources to navigate such a crisis, because that's what it was. And I've had people ask me, like, how do you become a leader? And I have no good answer for that, because the leadership that I forged was not because I wanted it. It wasn't because I wanted to put that crown on. It was not. It was out of necessity for survival. And I feel like some of the best leaders are forged under chaos and strife because they don't have a choice. Um, the leaders who are chosen to lead because no one else can are the strongest leaders that I see and I feel, But there was this vacuum in my childhood during that crisis situation, and the paternal authority, it collapsed because of addiction, and I had a choice to make. If I don't rule, everyone will die, and that sounds dramatic, but it's true. Uh, it was a choice that I had to really consider, and only for a minute though. My heart wouldn't let me. My heart wouldn't let me turn my head. And try not to judge these open conversations, because this is the active process of what you go through, and it's to bring awareness and help people understand things that maybe they needed more clarification on, or maybe they didn't quite understand, and that's okay. Or maybe you're a master in this and you already understand this. Either way, I'm trying to let that mask of strength down and to really teach from a place that I know I'm a Leo rising, and to teach from a place that I feel like I have wisdom in. Um, but I had a choice to make. If I do not rule, everyone will die. And that's just literally where I was at. And I remember pausing for a second and saying, do not put this crown on if you're not willing to rule. If you can't do it, don't, because you become isolated. I could no longer express my fear, because to show fear would scare everyone else. I become very good at hiding and masking my emotions, having control of my emotions in the worst, and I mean the worst situations. Um, because I didn't have time to have an emotional display. I had to react. I had to do things. And what happened to me is I became the fighter. And some of you heard me talk about, you know, fighting for survival and being overly identified with that. This is why. So not only was I a child king archetype, but I also became the fighter. And it went on for decades after the crisis was over. But which led to hypervigilance and severe burnout in my life, because sometimes you just forget what the original fight started over. But you build up of hyper competence and you isolate. That's what you do, because no one will really truly understand, what it is that you're going through. And so there was this core motivation to prevent total annihilation and to protect the vulnerable. Now, my brother and my mom was considered the vulnerable. And like, you were constantly in this fight. There's like fight or flight mode. And I was constantly in fight, and no one can keep that up. I mean, I did for decades. I don't suggest you do that. But there's this feeling of like permanently like having to guard against like immediate disaster, and like the calm before the storm. Now, what do I mean by that? Like, when there was peace, it's like you feel like something else is coming because it's just too damn quiet. Um, and honestly, in my belief system was that adults were unreliable and I am entirely on my own. And I hate to even admit that out loud, but that's literally what I was going through in my mind. And I would not let myself cry in front of people. I would not let myself show weakness in front of people, because I seen that as a vulnerability or a death, right? If you guys know, I talked a little bit about in the July 2026 reading, submission was equal to death to me, and that belief. And I truly lived by that philosophy. I would not give an inch. I would not quit. I just would get back up and um, take those hits from life, right? Because I was the fighter. Take those hits from life and get back up. Just to prove that I could. And it was not a. You should never want to be a king, unless you have to. You should never want to be a leader like that if you don't have to, because sometimes it can break things within you that takes a while to really get to the root of and fix. And I've spent the majority of my adulthood trying to repair the things that I didn't consciously know. I didn't understand that taking the crown then would lead me to a place where I mean, I didn't even know who I was. I didn't even know who I was at the time. And in adulthood, I felt like I needed to maintain that control of my scenario so that I could avoid chaos. I didn't want the same past chaos coming back. And it did give me the drive to go and get uh my registered nurse license and whatnot. So it gave me a drive to have some things to fall back on. But I've had to learn that I forfeited the crown of ruling out of necessity and chaos, and I'm building my own kingdom of peace and enjoying it. That was a big thing that I've had to really learn, and not feeling like I need to be hyper vigilant because there is sort of this mistaking of peace for danger. Okay. It's been difficult to reteach my nervous system these things. And I've always had sort of this calm, grounded responsiveness, even if on the inside it was not that. Okay. But this is truly having that true, calm, grounded responsiveness from the inside. um, I also struggled with, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done right in my adulthood, you know, um, to like not asking for help, like really taking on some hard loads. Like, I remember, at work and stuff, like doing stuff that absolutely probably looked horrible on the outside because I was doing so much. And they're like, you need to slow down. I mean, I've constantly heard that. Like, I even had a coworker joke with me and be like, you get paid by the hour. Um, one moment, please. I had to fix my son something for breakfast. I went from, if I don't do this all on my own, to it's not going to get done right. Um, and then I just isolated myself, right? And was competent and compliant, and I did achieve a lot of things. I'm very proud of my achievement. I just wish it was done under different circumstances. Um, I consider myself successful in life. Of course, that's subjective to everyone else. And um, I feel like I've done well. I mean, I have a life that most would refer to as a vacation. It's a pretty good life, and I've had to really work in my adult energy um, to, like I said, to create a kingdom of peace and to be like, how am I going to enjoy my kingdom today? Instead of like, what crisis do I need to avert, or like, what chaos is going to ensue because it's a peaceful time. Um, I've really worked on that calming energy, grounding energy, and responsiveness, and being able to be calm on the inside because I'm not in that dangerous situation that I where my foundation was falling, from previous. But it's interesting how belief systems can get ingrained into you, and you will not even be aware of it to a certain extent. It becomes like unconscious. And I can delegate things now. And I can trust that it's going to get done. And I couldn't do that at one point. I couldn't do that. Sorry, it must be something because I'm just now speaking up about this stuff. Um, and really balancing like a resting period for myself, like accepting that true power includes like knowing when to rest and not being valued based upon like my productivity or these external parameters. That's been a big adjustment for me as well. I always persevered at work because I have a work ethic. Like, it's not natural. Like, no one can keep that up without burning out. And I certainly burned out, so you're at risk for burnout if you have a belief system within you that you're unaware of. So it's really good to check these belief systems and like how your philosophies on life. Like, um, when I realized that I had just been in this fight mode my entire life, for survival. Your survival is threatened. You will take on the role that you need to, and it creates this disintegration of who you are. And I've had to reintegrate aspects of myself that I had to push away because of that crown hitting my head, and it was heavy and a lot of weight. Um, at one point when I was younger, we didn't have anything. So scarcity mindset was a thing. Like, we lost all the physical material things. I lost everything in my childhood, our home, even my trophies, where I actually did express some creativity for cheerleading and whatnot. I lost everything. I mean, we lost everything, but we still had each other. And I was exhausted because I was trying to protect my mom, my brother, you know, what little bit we had. But in adulthood, I'm more motivated by like wisdom that I've gained and purpose and, my legacy, my boys, my twinses. But it was a hard road to get there. I had a lot of issues within authority figures, because authority figures in the past were not to be relied upon in my belief system. And sometimes when you do things in your life, um, and it challenges someone else's belief system, they're not ready, because that's a whole paradigm collapse. Like, it's when I say, like, you realize that you've been in this belief system and you have to deal with it, it's like really difficult, because you're like, holy shit, I've been fighting my entire life. Like, what did this fight even start over? Because the distance between the actual occurrence of events and the present moment becomes so distant, it's hard to place it. You have to do some digging to really figure it out, because it's not like screaming in your face, right? It shapes who you are, and it's a false mask of who you are. It's what you had to be to survive, and you have to really travel backwards and go within to try to figure out who the hell you really are. And so what kept the child king alive was that fight in me, my heart, fighting with my whole heart, to protect the people that were vulnerable, to protect the people that I love. And I learned that life was a battlefield, and that is not accurate. It's not accurate. I felt like if I pushed harder, I would win. And what I would win was survival. And then as I got into like corporate job, like institutions and stuff like that, and started to really practice as a provider, a nurse, their systems, their structure is built on performance. They don't, and I'm not saying that there's not bosses that care about you, because I've had a few, but if you push back on that system of corruption, and I talked a little bit about that corruption in August 2026, I think. But when you push back on that corruption, you get titled as the issue, right? You become like the scapegoat, and it's just you, and you won't. But it's like, because you're challenging their belief system, and weak people or corrupt people, let's say the cube or dwellers is what I called them, they will defend the system that put them in a position of power. And I learned as a nurse that sometimes no amount of fighting or force can change any kind of situation if everybody's in a belief system that they feel like it's okay. And it's not our place to convince other people, of morals. It's just not. And that was really hard for me. It shattered things for me, because I had to submit for the first time, because removing my energy was a better way to use it, because what I was doing, fighting for what was right, speaking up for the nurses that wouldn't speak up, um, that were vulnerable, new nurses, it it caused a lot of problems. And trying to get people to see when they just had no heart in the game, like, and not everybody was that way. I'm just talking about like some of the situations that I dealt with. I'm trying to be respectful, because I'm not trying to actually start anything. I'm actually just trying to teach from a place of how I realized that I was in that fight. And then you start fighting battles that aren't yours to fight, that it doesn't matter what you do or what you say, it's not going to change anything. And that's where you realize. But it was really understanding the belief of submission equal death to me, but then looking at fighting as yielding zero results. It was so hard. And a part of me felt like a failure walking away from that structure, because I was fighting for what was right. I feel like for morality, things that people should just already know, like against the corruption and things like that. And I was in this mindset of like, never surrender. Surrender equals death. And it was like, that was my religion. That's what kept me alive. Like, that's what kept my mom and my brother alive. And I was viewing life as war. And to be like 10 steps ahead was the way to combat any adversary, you know? And I've been sat down since I have went into this sort of divine reset that I talked about in July. You know, I had some healing where I had reflected upon my father and the situation and how I see it differently now. And even further out, I walked away from my institutional job to try to create something that allowed me to be more myself and to value that time and not have to be within crumbling structures. Really, I hate to say it like that, but it's crumbling structures. And there was a crisis point, you know, where I'm now in between waiting for a response. And I'm okay with whatever that response is. Now, you know, 3 years ago, I'd have been tripping out. But, you know, what's meant for me is always going to be for me, and nothing that I do is going to mess that up. And, you know, God has a plan for me, and it is what it is. And I've just, I don't have to fight anymore. Okay. Like, it doesn't matter what I do. If I'm just constantly in a state of fighting, and I've learned to set my kingdom up in a way that is comfortable for me. Because there's this cognitive dissonance that happens, you know, if you do have to wait, say like you're applying for a job and you have to wait, because that's a scenario I find myself in. This is an amazing opportunity, by the way. I feel like it's right in alignment with like what I do. So I'm super excited about it, but if it's not for me, it's not for me. But that cognitive dissonance happens, and your brain equates that waiting period with submission. So it's been another way that that belief system has come up out of the, you know, in here. And then again, that submission with death, obviously we have to pay our bills. Like, we got to have money, right? And to not see it like that, but to focus on other things as well, and not just become fixated on like your psyche focusing on like losing the kingdom, because it's, you know, whether you believe it or not, you do have people that are there, are placed there to help you, and doors that are opened because, you know, you have a higher power that is working in your favor. So I've had to go through this psychological reversal on how I viewed power and surrender. And I talked a little bit about that in August 2026 about my father and when he passed away. And I was like this traumatized child king warrior, you know, and submission equaled death. And I was constantly fighting in my environment. And it was childhood terror, basically. It's embarrassing to say, but it's so true. And then you realize as you work through this shadow work, or whatever you want to term it, that surrender is actually a divine strategy, and standing still because you don't have to do anything, because your presence in the room is just, it is what it is, right? And having this new consciousness, okay, that the world is a high demand place, and people will want more and more and more from you, and it's up to you to really set those healthy boundaries of like what you want your life to be like. Because the truth is, what I was fighting for was freedom. That's the whole mind-boggling thing of it. I was fighting for freedom from a failing structure, um and I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that's what I was fighting for, because I was just in fight mode. And, you know, always had the power to free myself. You always have had the power to free yourself. And I handed back that crown. And I was no longer responsible for what happened in my past. And I was not responsible for a piece of hospital networks, none of that. My kingdom was my current reality. And that was when it all shifted. Now, to other people, they see an identity crisis, right? But this is the deep dive of that so that you further understand it if you care to know. I mean, if you don't, that's fine. You don't have to watch this. But I chose to stand down. I stopped trying to achieve these things and hit these unmeetable, and I mean unmeetable parameters. I just let the process play out, and I started acting out of sovereignty where I know my worth, applied for bigger deal jobs that would provide more freeing up of my time. So, you know what I mean? Than what I had previously looked at. I learned about my signal, my essence, and how a title is just a box. And how do I best utilize that energy? And that when you try to fit into a box, the box changes, and that's kind of a setup for failure if you're not aware of that. But I started to really believe and understand sovereignty and stop playing so small and like really understand that my worth is undeniable. What I know as a nurse is undeniable, and my skill is elite, period. I mean, I've got over 10 years of multi-nursing, and that I am in high demand. It's just I have to be at the right place, and if I'm playing small with people around me, institutions around me that don't see my value and worth, they're never going to understand because they're in a belief that value and worth is measured differently than what I measure. And so it's a system that is not achieved within. It's a failing structure. I've seen it over the years. Like it's not working anymore. Um, but I got my registered nurse degree, and I actually have a professional license. I'm a provider, and that gives me financial autonomy, um, being able to support and provide for my twins and my kingdom here. And I had to really come to the understanding that the house is no longer falling down. The war that I was fighting ended years ago, and I've been in this energy of anchoring my life and working things out. Talking about the child king, it was because I had to survive is why I really leaned into that fighter, right? There's fight or flight response, and I stopped at the fight. I was forced at a young age because the house was falling apart. I skipped a carefree childhood. And I think the hardest thing for me as an adult is learning how to have fun. Rulers don't get to have fun. Like I didn't get that opportunity. So that's also been something else, like not feeling guilty for resting, not feeling guilty for enjoying my life. That has been the absolute hardest thing for me, to play, to do things just because. I mean, you would think that was absolutely heresy to say. It's insane, right? But it's not. Like I have had to learn how to play. I have found other ways to creatively channel my Leo energy, but play was not one of those. So I swing. Okay, when I get the chance, I go to the arcades with my twins. I've got a vacation scheduled. I'm going to go on vacation for the first time in 2 years. I want to enjoy the time that I have within my kingdom with my kids. They will never know what it's like to be crowned in chaos and not want it, because that I promised them. I want them to look back and reflect on their childhood as great. I mean, not perfect, but great. Like, hey, my parents really loved me. They tried really hard. And they're my legacy. They're my everything. But I went straight into rule, straight into rulership. Crowned out of pure survival. I don't even know how else to say it. Like, because the adults couldn't govern the situation. They couldn't keep the castle upright. And I felt like I couldn't show fear. I felt like I had to be strong for everyone else. And I became an actual hyper independent adult. This is embarrassing to say, but I don't have very many I mean, I actually have no close friends. I have associates, alliance that I talk to, people from a distance, but I don't have really close friendships, because when you take that crown that you didn't want, it doesn't work like that. It's not about the social dynamics that you normally would have in your life as a child and then into teenage years. You don't have that. You're not doing that. You're more focused on bigger things like survival. My father's addiction caused my world to collapse, and my mother was literally left without the resources, and I mean that when I say that, to navigate such a crisis. And of course, there was my 3-year-old brother who was completely vulnerable. I didn't have the choice to be a kid ever, and that was really hard for me to look back on. But that crown was such a heavy responsibility. I'm telling you, to keep my mother and my brother alive, it was such a heavy responsibility. Don't ever put that crown on if you don't plan on being the king or queen. Don't do it. And don't do it just because you want it, because you have no idea what it is that you want. It's hard, and you should never want to have eyes on you unless you really have something to say, because things can get awry, amiss in that energy. And obviously, people who shouldn't be donning that crown should never do that, because a lot of damage and fallout can happen. I was the source of protection, and that was one of my words, the protector, that come out for the vulnerable and weak. I ran a kingdom before I even knew who the hell I was. Like, I didn't even know who I was at the time. All of my friends, like distant friends at the time, like they were going out and doing kid things and hanging out and doing all these things, and I had such responsibility on me. Like, I could not do that. I could not. I dealt with the shadow side of Scorpio. Scorpio fourth house and moon in Scorpio. Literal tearing down of the foundations, and my home was a place of survival, where I learned that peace was dangerous, where I learned to protect. And I've really been working on the reversal of that. So I can have a kingdom and a crown built on self-worth and rest, and, changing that up. My nervous system has been the biggest thing to try to reprogram here. I hate to use that word, but it's true. Um, it's been hard, because that nervous system is been sort of like in a fight mode for so long, survival mode. that it's become a philosophy, a belief that had to be transmuted, changed, understood differently, and taken more of a peacemaker or a peaceful energy. What I have can't be stolen. And I don't have to fight to keep what I have, because what's meant for me is meant for me. And I've had to stop over delivering to people who didn't give me anything in return. Like, literally, that's been a big thing for me. But this is just something to think about, this is one of those deeper discussions that kind of ties in my creation of July, August, that energy, so you understand more about how to integrate those. So let's get a couple of charms, and then we will throw a couple of cards for you if this is your energy. We've got a deer. Maybe you're seeing deer a lot lately. We've got an anchor, another anchor, Eiffel Tower, a camel, and a heart. Okay, so those might resonate for you. I'm also seeing a tennis racket. So I don't know if you felt like life has sort of been this. Okay, it's back and forth. Let's just not take that until it comes out. So if you've had some bad news lately where something didn't go your way, all right, where you're really ready to take this leap, or you don't get chosen for something, like, trust that it's in alignment, because the Page of Pentacles in reverse is taking this small opportunity, or if you've let go of something, you will get a payback here with the Knight of Pentacles. Just know that the Knight of Pentacles is very slow moving energy, right? You have to have patience with this energy, and perseverance and hard work. And I think what it's saying is that your perseverance and hard work has paid off. And there is this maturity with the energy, because you took this leap of faith. Okay. Because you moved away from what was. And there is a new beginning on the horizon for you, a new change. Okay. A new one, innocent, even. I don't know who this is for, but I feel like also, like, if you've had to sacrifice, like, I feel like that if you've had to sacrifice your innocence, I'm not sure why it's coming out this way, but you will, those sacrifices do get noticed, and slowly but surely things come your way that is meant for you. Okay. But you have a new beginning here, a total new beginning in your life. Like, I definitely feel the full energy of taking that leap, um, moving from corporate settings, or like institutional settings, and saying, I'm not fitting within the structure that's crumbling. And I'm going to take a chance and listen to my intuition and go where I know that they will treat me better with my skill set, or they'll see my skill set as elite, because it is. Um, And that I'm in that energy of patience right now because I chose to do that leap of faith. A camel goes the distance, you know what I mean? Like, so again, the death card, extensive change, walking away from what doesn't work, understanding that there's something in the past that is no longer in your present and you don't need to function or be that way anymore. Extensive change, liberation and empowerment in your energy, resurgence, right? Transformation, purification. It's a dawn of a new era, a new kingdom for you. So embrace this. Even if you're not really sure if you've done the right thing, trust that you're aligned. There's double anchors here, so you definitely have this intuition about you, or this anchoring in, and I feel like that's telling me that, like, your inner world, your inner heart, whatever it is that is your true signal, knows right where to lead you, right? And for some of you, it's your heart, right? Mine was definitely my heart. My heart said I cannot leave them in this situation because I just can't. I love people, and I can't, especially the vulnerable. I'm going to protect. I can't help it. That's a strong thing for me. Um, so just knowing that whatever this anchor is, or anchoring down your heart double time here, it's leading you to this beautiful new beginning of a journey and this dawn of a new era. And that's what I have for you. So hopefully that brought you some sort of peace. And thank you, as always, for hanging out with me. And I hope you find something within these readings. If you haven't watched July 2026, you should. August 2026, both of those are already out way in advance. But this is a little bit more in depth of those concepts and how I come up with this and what I'm going through and how I'm teaching from a place of wisdom. But I love you guys. And until next time, stay in your Taccion mind. Bye.